On the first one, the president said yesterday that the bullet hit Charlie, but it was aimed at every one of us. Do you and your colleagues have a heightened sense of fear following this shooting and this far-left violence we're seeing across the country?
I certainly think there's a heightened sense of awareness by conservatives across the country, by all of us here at the White House. Again, as I said to Monica, many of us were personal friends with Charlie and had involvement with Turning Point before we came and served our government in this way. So certainly it's a very shocking incident, and I think, it's very unfortunate that those of us who work in this movement have to think about violence just for speaking our minds and for supporting President Trump.
And as a follow-up on that, I asked the president last night on Air Force One about this pattern of transgender violence we're seeing. Charlie's killer lived with his boyfriend who identifies as transgender, and then we had the Annunciation shooting, the Covenant shooting, all of these incidents. The president said that we're looking into transgender violence. Does that mean the FBI is looking into it? And can you give any more clarity on how the administration is viewing this uptake in specifically transgender violence?
It's definitely something worth looking into, and I think anyone who denies that at this point is being willfully ignorant. And the administration is taking it seriously, all causes of violence, and why these people would be driven to such evil and such hatred. And there's probably many answers to that question, but the administration is really focused on all of them. For individual investigations and cases, of course, the FBI and the Department of Justice are leading those. But as for this overall violence and domestic terrorism that we're seeing, the White House and the president's policy team will be leading the charge, and that really begins with designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. And I can assure you there will be additional actions to come.
Sure, in the pink.
Thanks, Caroline. Liz Landers with PBS NewsHour. I just wanted to follow up quickly on something that the president had said yesterday. So we heard from Erica Kirk. She said she forgives the man who shot and killed her husband. And then right after that, we heard from the president who said, I hate my opponent and I don't want the best for them. How does that square with bringing down the temperature of political violence in this country? And then, if I could, I had a follow-up on Venezuela, too.
Look, the president is authentically himself. I think that's why millions of Americans across the country love him and support him, including Erica Kirk, who you saw so beautifully was on stage with the president in an unthinkable moment, in the midst of an unthinkable tragedy, and was leaning on the president for support during that time. And he was there to give it to her, as well as the vice president and many other top-ranking cabinet officials.
Government and local officials said that Antifa inscriptions were engraved in these bullet casings that killed Charlie Kirk. It appears to be a trend, especially after what we saw in the Annunciation church shooting, Catholic church shooting. Additionally, Stephen Miller recently commented on the rise in this kind of violence, saying there is a domestic terrorist movement growing in this country. The president is designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. I'm wondering what is the approach to holding these people accountable, just to ensure that violence like this just is eradicated moving forward?
Sure. Well, Antifa is going to be designated a domestic terrorist organization. The president intends to sign that executive order very soon as it's drafted, as soon as today, later this afternoon. And this is something the president campaigned on because we have seen a rise in violence perpetuated by Antifa radical people across this country who subscribe to this group. And unfortunately, it's gone widely uncovered by many in the legacy media. It also went completely ignored by the previous administration. Not anymore. Not only, as you mentioned, were the bullet casings subscribed with Antifa mottos, if you will, in the heinous assassination of Charlie, but there have also been more examples than I could read off for you here in this briefing room today of violence from Antifa. I will just read a few. In July 2025, several members of an Antifa cell ambushed and opened fire on officers at an ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas, shooting one officer in the neck. Also in July 2025, 3 Antifa members were charged with assaulting a police officer during a violent riot outside an ICE facility in Portland, which for weeks prior had been under siege from the local Antifa terror cell. In February 2024, a transgender Antifa terrorist detonated an explosive device outside of the office of the Republican Attorney General of Alabama. In July 2023, Antifa members linked to abortionist group Jane's Revenge firebombed pro-life facilities and vandalized churches. In January 2022, a suspected Antifa member was arrested for bringing a pipe bomb to a pro-Trump event. In January 2021, an Antifa supporter threatened to shoot police officers and Trump supporters outside of the Florida State Capitol building. Again, I could continue to list many more examples for those in the room who don't believe this is a serious threat to American safety and our national security, but this administration knows that it is. That's why the president will be signing this order. And we will also be, most importantly, looking at who is funding Antifa and who is funding these other violent left-wing groups that we've seen perpetuate so much crime and mayhem across our country.